So let's everybody welcome Bryan.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. My name is Bryan, and I was with the fire department for 20 years. And you know, as firefighters, got to have a part-time gig, right? So I did a little moonlighting as a professional comedian. And so, make some extra money. It's kind of fun to do on the side. And one of the things that happened when I was doing stand-up was the View. Have you heard of the View? With Barbara Walters. It used to be Barbara Walters. Now it's Joe Behar and some other people. But they were looking for the funniest firefighters in America, and I didn't have any idea. I didn't know anything about it. But one of the comedy club owners that I worked for, she got an email about it. And so she sent in one of my promo tapes. Well, it was a VCR tape, so it tells you how long ago that's been. It's been a while. And so I made the top three. So there was a New York City firefighter that made it, and there was a firefighter from California, and then me from Williamsburg. And so they flew us up, and we performed live on The View. There was 11 million people watching that day, and it was the funniest firefighter got to go to sunny Jamaica for 7 days and 7 nights at the world famous Sandals Resort. And the second funniest firefighter got to talk to CIT classes. Thank you. So that's how that worked out. But I was the first loser. I started the fire department. I joined the volunteer fire department in James City County in 1983. And so I just turned 57, so that was 40 years ago. Hard to believe. But I graduated from Lafayette High School without honors in 84. And my mother was so proud of me. And then in 1990, I got married for the first time. And we had a son in 95, and then unfortunately in 97 I got divorced. And but I did spend I spent a ton of time with my son. And of course in Williamsburg we've got Busch Gardens right there, so we spent a lot of time going to Busch Gardens. We spent a lot of time feeding ducks too, by the way. We put some ducks on Weight Watchers, man. We fed a lot of. I had a 20-pound bag of corn in my van that I kept all the time. That and a moose cup we used to feed out some ducks. But we'd go to Busch Gardens, and he loved Busch Gardens, but he was too small for the roller coasters. So you're looking at a guy who's ridden a log flume 9,000 times. And so anyway, I did a lot of that stuff with him. So I spent a ton of time with my son, and then. And he started kindergarten. When he started kindergarten, I went ahead and started up a handyman business. Again, you got to have a part-time gig when you're a firefighter. So I started doing a handyman business, and it got bigger and bigger, and I kept buying more vans and hiring more firefighters on their days off. I had a couple other employees that were full-time, but mostly just firefighters. I got remarried again in 2002, and life was going really well. We were spending a lot of time in Las Vegas and Atlantic City. We were cruising to Alaska and Grand Caymans and Mexico and Jamaica. We were taking the kids down to Disney every year. We're going to Ocracoke Island all the time. We just had a brand new 5-bedroom custom home built, brand new Escalade sitting in the driveway, and then I got depressed. I mean, everything was going so well, and then I got depressed. I mean, we had plenty of money in the bank. We had no debt. I mean, we hadn't made it. And but I got really depressed, and I got so depressed, I started thinking about suicide. And for somebody like me, I mean, in the fire department, the police department, you see suicides. I mean, that's just something that you see. But it used to make me mad because a lot of times the family members would find them. So the fact that I started thinking about suicide was 180 degrees of how I thought. And it was just not a normal thought for me. And so one day, it was a Sunday afternoon, I went to a job site. We were flipping a house. It was a real estate deal. And this particular house had a carport, and the carports are about a story and a half tall. And I got a ladder and a rope, and I went up and I tied the rope off into one of the trusses, and I made a noose and I put it around my neck, and I stood on top of this ladder for well over an hour, trying to get the courage to push it over. And I had like a hand on the truss, and I rock it over on two legs, and just trying to get the courage to just push it on over. I just couldn't quite do it. I couldn't quite get to, and I felt like a failure. And when I was depressed, I felt like I didn't do anything right. Nothing I could do was right. And so I left there and went home. And the next day I'm driving down 199 there in Williamsburg, and I just started crying. I mean, just started bawling, man. I was a mess. And my wife, she was the director of the emergency room at Centera Hospital at the time. And I called her, and she said, meet me at the urgent care. So I went to the urgent care, and I met with the doctor there. We both did. And we knew the doctor, we knew all the nurses, we knew everybody there. I was a firefighter, and I was also a medic. And so I knew a lot of the medical people in town too. So the doctor, he said, well, I fell one time and I broke my arm, and I got depressed. And I took some antidepressants for a while. After that, I felt better about it. I got off the meds and everything worked out. He said, why don't we try that? I said, all right, fine, So he goes out to write the script. And while he was out, I confided in my wife about trying to, hang myself. And she goes, you got to tell the doctor that. I said, nah, I ain't got to tell the doctor. She said, you really got to tell him. I said, nah, I don't want to tell him. And I know the drill. You tell a police officer, firefighter, a nurse, a doctor that you've thought about killing yourself, you've tried to kill yourself, you got two options. You can A, go to a psychiatric facility, or you can B, go to a psychiatric facility. I knew how that was going to work out. And so he comes back in, and I told him what happened. He says, Bryan, he goes, do you want me to call the fire department or do I call the police department? I said, call the fire department, And I was in the fire department for 20 years, so I knew just about everybody. Well, these two guys rolled in an ambulance, and I didn't know either one of them. And which was fine with me, except for one of them knew who I was, and I didn't know it. And they ended up taking me down to Riverside Psychiatric, and but that whole patient confidentiality thing, that ain't worth a damn. I'm gonna tell you. Because the guy who knew me, he told everybody. Every firefighter and police officer in Williamsburg and James City County knew that Sanderson was in Riverside Psychiatric before lunchtime. So, I don't fault the guy for that, but we all do it. We talk about each other. We wouldn't call Wave DV10 and tell them, but we're going to tell all the firefighters and police officers we know. So anyway, I was there, and they put me in a ward with people who were detoxing. Now, depressed out of my mind, I didn't want to hang out with a bunch of drug addicts. I just didn't want to do that. So the doctors came in about 8 o'clock in the morning. There's probably 20 of us on the ward. And but the doctors come rolling in every morning about 8 o'clock, and they ask you the same question. I should have got an Oscar. Because he says, so how do you feel? Oh, I feel great, doctor. He goes, do you have any thoughts of hurting yourself? No, I love me. I told him what he wanted to hear. And then 72 hours, he cut me loose. And I was having trouble sleeping when I was there. So they had me on an antidepressant, but they also put me on Ambien for sleep, and that wasn't doing it. So they lined me up with tranquilizers. But when they discharged me, why in the world would you discharge someone from a psychiatric facility who's had suicidal thoughts or tendencies with 30 days with the sleeping pills, 30 days worth of psychotropic medications for the depression, and 6,000 milligrams of tranquilizers.
Jesus.
Anybody got any idea? 'Cause I don't have a clue, but that's what they did. And so my wife came and picked me up and took me home. And I will tell you, I was just as depressed as I was before I went in there. I acted my way out of that place, is what I did. You know, these psychotropic medications, they don't work overnight. It's not like taking a Tylenol or an Advil or something. It takes a while for it to kick in. And so I walked in the house, went right to the bedroom, closed the blinds, closed the curtains, took all my clothes off, threw them in the corner of the room, crawled right into bed, and laid there and looked at I had a digital clock by my bed, and I watched that digital clock tick away minute
Now play
by
My
minute.
Boy by LB Shane on.
Hold my calls, would you? I said, you know what, now that you did that, let me put mine on vibrate. That's all right. You're not the only one. So anyway, so I'm watching this clock tick by, and I did this for about 3 days, and I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to brush my teeth. I didn't want to get up to go to the bathroom. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to watch TV. I didn't want to do a thing. And on the third morning, it must have been around, I don't know, 4:30, 5 o'clock, somewhere in that area. I had done all these little calculations in my tiny little mind, and I figured, you know what, if I took all the pills, I'd probably never wake up. And my wife was upstairs sleeping. She was sleeping in the guest room. We were having marital problems. 95% of our marital problems were probably my fault, because I wasn't the guy that she married. I wasn't the funny firefighter anymore. I was the depressed guy. Nobody wanted to hang out with. I was just no fun to be with. And so I got up early in the morning. I went in the bathroom. I looked in the mirror, and I said, just get it over with. I opened up the vanity. I pulled out the 3 bottles of pills, and I took every pill. Put the tops back on them, put them back in the vanity, shut the drawer, went and laid back down. And it must have been 15 or 20 minutes, and the door opened up. Sometimes she'd have to go to the bathroom, and she would come downstairs, use our bathroom, and she would just lay in the bed until it was time to get up and go to the hospital. And she came in, used the bathroom, got into bed, and I laid there for a minute or so, and I said, I'm going to go upstairs in the game room and watch TV. I can't sleep. She didn't say anything to me. So I got up, and I started up the steps, and the medication was working on me already. I had to use the hand railings to get up the steps. And I got into the game room, and we had a big oversized couch there, and I laid down on the couch. I don't know if I turned the TV on. I don't remember. And as the story goes, she came up to check on me before she went to the hospital. And thank God she did that. She probably saved my life. And she found me. I wasn't on the couch. I was on the floor, curled up in a fetal position, barely breathing. And so she ran downstairs, checked the pill bottles. They were empty. She called 911. Here comes the fire department. Here comes the police department. And they scooped me up. And of course, I knew I don't remember any of it, but I found out I knew the medic, buddy of mine. They took me to the hospital, and of course, her emergency room, her employees had to work on me. That didn't go over well later, too. I heard about that. And they worked on me for a while, and they got me stabilized. They got me up to ICU. I talked to one of the nurses that worked on me later. I ran into her at a store, and she told me that I had stopped breathing 3 times before they got me stabilized and got me upstairs to ICU. So thank God my wife came to check on me. So I was in ICU, and I was blacked out the whole time. This is ICU like the next afternoon. And so I wake up, I come out of this blackout, and I'm laughing hysterically. I mean, I'm laughing a lot, big time. And once I realized where I was, and all of a sudden it's like somebody turned the switch off, man, and I felt like a truck hit me. And my pastor was standing right there next to the bed, and he was talking to me. And I looked out in the hallway, and my wife was standing right there wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, talking to the president of the hospital. And that's another thing, didn't go over well either. So I was there for a little bit, and it wasn't too long after that, then 2 deputies came rolling in, and I knew both of the deputies, you know, and they both gave me a hug, and they said, look, we're not going to put the handcuffs on you, we're just going to slip out the back way, and we got to take you back down to Riverside Psychiatric. But anyway, so I got like ECO'd or TTO'd, I got O'd, I don't know what it was, but I got one O. So anyhow, so we went out the back entrance, and then when we went out the back entrance, there was 2 ambulances back there. They were restocking. One was a James City ambulance, one was Williamsburg, and both of the EMTs that were restocking the ambulances, they both saw me, and they both came running over, and each one of them hugged me, and both of them cried, and I cried, and one of the deputies cried. You know, mental illness just doesn't affect one person. It affects a lot of people. And so they took me back down to Riverside Psychiatric, and I can tell you, man, that doctor was highly upset. He knew that I talked my way out of there. And this particular time, instead of keeping me 3 days, they kept me 11 days. And then in the doctor's defense, I actually felt okay. I wasn't 100%, but I didn't feel like killing myself. So my wife came and picked me up, took me back home, and I was very fortunate. I had one of the firefighters. He was my job foreman, and he kept the jobs going, and you know, everything. My secretary, she kept things rolling along. So I kind of like fell in with everybody and just started working again. And that was July of 2004. So July 2004, and so everything's going fine. I'm taking the medication like I'm supposed to take the medication, and so long about, I guess it was January, first week in January, my wife came to me and she says, you know, are you building something really big somewhere? And I was like, well, you know, not really. And she goes, well, look at this. And so she hands me this paper, and it's a bar graph. She put everything in QuickBooks. I'm not a computer guy. But she put everything of our, you know, all the firefighters, everybody had debit cards. So if you needed something, you just went and bought it. And, you know, whether it was lumber or saws or gasoline or whatever. So she gives me this bar graph, and from January to November, you know, we spent $25,000 to $27,000 a month just in operating costs, whether it be payroll or anything else. And on December, we spent $55,000. More than double. And I thought, man, what in the world? Man, somebody's robbing me. Somebody's buying stools and selling them or taking them to the pawn shop or something's not right. So my wife says, well, let's go down to the shop and look around. All right, yeah. So we went down to the shop, and I opened up one of the garage doors, and there was just stacks and stacks of brand new tools and equipment, still in their boxes, still wrapped up in plastic. You know, I even had like a rebar saw for cutting rebar. You don't use rebar as a handyman. I mean, I didn't need a rebar saw. I mean, I just was buying everything. And I looked around, there was stacks of lumber, and there was another van. She goes, whose work van is that over there? I said, well, that's our work van. She goes, what are we doing with that work van? I said, you can't have enough extra work vans. She looked at me and she goes, you're bipolar. I said, I am not bipolar. She goes, you're bipolar. I said, I'm not. She goes, you're bipolar. I said, I'm not. She goes, let's go to the doctor and talk to me. Yeah, let's go to the doctor and talk to me. Went to the doctor, and the doctor says to me, I told him, well, he says, I think you're bipolar. I said, I can't be bipolar. He said, why not? I said, because I don't want to be bipolar. You know, who wants to be bipolar? So, and this is the doctor at the urgent care. And he goes, you know, you need a psychiatrist. Let me give you, so he gives me a referral to a psychiatrist. So I go to the psychiatrist and I tell him what's going on. And he goes, well, what medication are you taking for your depression? I said, well, I'm taking Lexapro. He goes, you can't take Lexapro if you're bipolar. It'll spin you into a manic phase. So well, I didn't know I was bipolar. You know, I mean, come on. So he takes me off of the Lexapro, and he puts me on 1,350 milligrams of lithium. All right, now remember that number, 1,350 milligrams. So all right, so now I'm taking lithium, and I'm taking it as prescribed every day. And this is January of 2005. And so I've taken it all the way up until about October. But see, I'm having trouble. I'm having side effects. I'm having weight gain. I gained a ton of weight. I'm having sexual side effects. And now I don't know who's in here, so I'm going to keep this PG-13. But, I mean, just trust me, sexual side effects are not good for a marriage. But before the lithium, sex was like a frozen popsicle. And after lithium, it was like soft serve. Thank you. And it doesn't sound like everybody got that, so that makes me a little nervous. I'm going to give you one more chance. You imagine shoving a marshmallow into a parking meter. If you didn't get that, see me after class, and I'll try to explain it to you. All right, so that was the one thing. The other side effect I had was thirsty. I'm constantly thirsty with lithium, constantly. I drink about a gallon of water a day, and when I do the talks, it's worse, like twice as worse. So I'm always drinking water. Another sexual side effect I had was I didn't have any desire to have sex. Now, what is your spouse thinking if you all of a sudden don't want to have sex anymore? Something's up. You know, she was a registered nurse, and I think she understood side effects, but I still think it messed with her head a little bit, and I get it, you know. It was not good. It was just not a good situation. And so anyway, I stopped taking the medication, and slowly but surely I started spending money again. And I was spending a lot of money, and I was buying everything. And a buddy of mine, he was with the SWAT team with James City County, and he was trying to get rid of his truck, and I think he was going through a divorce or something. And he had a really nice F-250 Super Duty 4-door king cab pickup truck. It was jacked up a little bit, had all the bells, all the whistles. He wanted $20,000 for it, and I didn't have $20,000. See, I paid cash for everything I did. I always had plenty of cash. Well, I was out of money, so I went and got a loan for the truck, and bought the truck from him. And then so I'm driving down Newport News, 143 Jefferson Avenue. Right across from the Patrick Henry Mall, there's this place called Dine RV. Well, this is going to surprise you. They were having a sale. I know. How could that be? So anyway, so I rolled in there, and I'm walking through the lot with the sales guy, and he's showing me all these different campers. And I see this one camper, and man, I love this camper. It's got all these bells and whistles, and it's just super cool. And I gotta have this camper because I don't have any money. So I had great credit though. So I got this camper on credit. So I hooked the camper up to the truck that I didn't need with the camper that I didn't need. And so I'm driving back to Williamsburg, and I'm driving along, and the window's down, the wind's blowing, the birds are chirping, and the music is playing, and everything is fantastic except for one thing. I don't camp. I'm not a camper. You know, that's again outrageous spending habits. You know, they say that a couple of things that people do when they're psychotic is when they're in the manic phase is they'll do outrageous spending habits, or they'll hypersexuality. They'll have sex with anybody, with any time, for any reason. And apparently, I went with the money. The other way probably would have been a little cheaper and a lot more fun, but that's the way it worked out. So I went with the cash. So anyway, and my wife, she finds out all the stuff I'm doing, and she's had it, man. She's done. She asked me to leave, and another thing that I did, I went and we had an office out of our home, and then we had a shop at a different location. And so I decided that I needed more storage space, so I went and got a lease on a small one-bedroom house right off of Jamestown Road, and it had 3 garages, which is it was more space for me for my business, which I needed. But it was $1,600 a month, and the other place I was only paying $100 a month, so it was about $1,500 more than what I needed to spend or what I should have spent, and it was a bad decision. It was a bad financial decision on my part, but when you're psychotic, man, when you're in your manic phase, you don't make good decisions. And my wife knew it. She had enough. She asked me to leave, so I was devastated. I didn't want to get divorced, and I already been divorced once. So that's my twice. I didn't want to be a 2-time loser. So I moved into that little brick house on the property, and my secretary, she set up her office in the dining room, and so I moved into the bedroom, and so I just kept working, and I was working a lot, and I wasn't sleeping much, and I'm a Christian. You know, I like listening to sermons on the radio, and I listen to my Bible every day for about an hour in the morning, and I like Bible study and stuff like that. So I was praying one night in January, and no, I think it was January. Anyway, I was praying, and after my prayer, I heard a voice, and I thought, wow. And the voice said, "Take your T-shirts to Texas." And see, I had started a Christian T-shirt because I'm spending as much money as I could possibly spend on everything. So I started up a Christian T-shirt company, and I had hundreds and hundreds of dollars with these Christian T-shirts that I had made up. And I talked to a lady online who lived in San Antonio, who had a shop there, who expressed some interest to carrying my shirts. So I thought, man, God wants me to send his shirts to Texas. You know, and I've heard pastors over the years, you know, God spoke to me and told me this, or God laid it on my heart to tell you that, or whatever. And I thought, man, God has finally found me, like I was lost or something. But so I did. The next morning, I boxed them all up and sent them to this lady in San Antonio. And so a couple of days later, I told my secretary, "I'll see you when I see you. I'm headed to San Antonio." And she was like, "What?" And but sure, I just packed it all up. So I hooked up the trailer, the camper trailer to the truck, and I loaded it with tools because for some reason in my mind I decided I was going to build a homeless shelter in San Antonio. I'm not sure how I figured that out. But I went to San Antonio, and I met with this lady at her business. All the shirts were there, and she was having some kind of a business after hours thing, kind of like a Better Business Bureau kind of thing maybe. But there was a lot of people there, and I gave all the T-shirts away. It's probably more than $1,000 a T-shirt. I gave them all away, just gone. Again, horrible decisions when it comes to money. And so while I'm there, I go to a church down there, and I enjoy the service, and I meet a guy who is homeless, ironically, and nice guy, really nice guy. And I thought, what do homeless people need? They need a home. So I take this guy and 2 of his friends who were also homeless, took them down the road to an apartment complex, and I leased them an apartment. I mean, I'm a nice guy. I mean, but that's over the top, man. So and it was $100 move-in special, so it only cost me $100 to get them in there. But still, I didn't have hardly any money left in my pocket, and so I went ahead and decided, and the voice is starting to talk to me more and more now. The voice is talking to me a lot, and it's telling me things like I need to move my business to Texas, you know? And that's a horrible decision. I mean, I had a small fleet of trucks, a bunch of firefighters working on their days off, and a couple of full-time employees and myself. But I had 750 customers in Williamsburg, and it took probably a decade to build that clientele, you know, that list of that group of customers. And I couldn't take a whole fleet of trucks and move them to Newport News, much less San Antonio, Texas, and have work for them, unless you got $1 million advertising budget, you know, to bring in a bunch of customers. So I'm thinking, God wants me to move to Texas, and God must know what he's talking about. So I go, and I'm out of money, and so I go to a pawn shop, and I pawn a bunch of tools and my toolbox and everything off my truck, and I got over $400, and I got this guy, his name was Kelly, the homeless guy. I got him to drive me to the airport. I don't even know if he had a driver's license. You know, I just let him take me to the airport, and so I got a ticket, and I flew back to Norfolk, and caught a ride, and got up to the main road, and walked down, got to the bus station, and I rode the bus from Norfolk back to Williamsburg, and of course the transportation center is right there by the fire station. And so I got out and walked into the back of the firehouse, and I must have looked pretty bad because two of the firefighters just handed me money. Just like, here's some cash. So I must have looked pretty rough. And so one of the guys battalion chief picked me up, took me to my house, my little rental home that I was living on Jamestown Road. And I got my dad was there, and I had a Jeep Cherokee, and I loaded that thing up with tools. And my dad, he gave me a couple $100. I didn't ask for the money, but he gave me $200. And I headed out again, headed to San Antonio. And I was on Interstate 85, and I was going through North Carolina, getting ready to cross into the South Carolina border. And the voice said, take the next exit, get a hotel, and get some sleep. Well, for a guy who hadn't slept in about 3 days, that sounded like pretty good advice, you know. So I took the next exit, lo and behold, 5-story hotel and a Denny's. The Denny's were good. Hang out at Denny's, man. And so I'm at the hotel, and I stayed there. I think it's like $80 a night to stay there. So after a couple of nights, I'm out of money. And of course I'm eating at Denny's around the clock. And I stayed there for 3 days. I don't know why I stayed there for 3 days. I don't have a clue. But I went to the pawn shop, pawned off a bunch of tools, got some more money. And so the third morning, I come out of the room, and I don't know if I forgot something. I don't know if it's the computer or what it was. But I tried to get back in. I hit the key card, and it gave me a red light. And I hit it again, and it gave me a red light. And I hit it, and I got a red light. And the more red lights I got, the madder I got, the aggravated I got, all these different emotions all bound up into one. And I took all my clothes off. It's fairly common for people who are psychotic to take their clothes off. And I don't know why that is. I haven't took my socks off. I took everything off. And my room was right by the elevator, and I hit the elevator button. Elevator opened up. I threw all my clothes in the elevator, and then I thought to myself, maybe I should get in the elevator with my clothes. That sounds logical, right? So I got in the elevator. And I turned around, the door closed. When the door closed, they had brass plates on them, and I could see my reflection. And when I could see that I was completely and totally naked, something up here went, that ain't right. That's messed up right there. You know? So I picked up my t-shirt and I put the t-shirt in front of me to cover myself. And so, for whatever reason, I just hit 5 and I hit 1. And I hit 5 and I hit 1. And I just went all the way up. The door would open, the door would close, go all the way down, the door would open, the door would close. And so I did that back and forth for several minutes. And then at some point I heard a ding and I look up and number 3 is lit. And I'm coming down. So I come down to get to number 3, the door opens, and there's a very petite woman standing there. Now, you would think she would A, take the other elevator. B, maybe she'll take the steps. Or C, get in the elevator with the large naked white man. Anybody want to guess what she did? This chick got in the elevator. The doctor said I was bipolar. I don't know what her problem was. I mean, so she gets in the elevator. I'm standing there in the t-shirt, clothes all over the place, shoes, socks, and so she stands right next to me, turns around, the door closes like this. I can see us both in reflection. She's over here. You know, so I give her one of these numbers. Hello. She didn't speak. There's some stuck-up people in South Carolina. So anyhow, so we get down to the first floor because I had number 1 push because I'm full service that way. And so she gets off the elevator, and I'm assuming she went by the front desk and had a little discussion about the guy in the elevator. The old naked guy in the elevator. So anyway, so it wasn't too long after that, then the door opened up on the I think it was the first floor, and 3 of Spartanburg, South Carolina's finest rolled into the elevator. And these guys jacked me up, handcuffed me, they roughed me up. These guys clearly never been through the CIT program. And so they must have been shift change. They were in no mood for none of my crap, basically. And so anyway, they arrested me and took me to jail. And they put a sheet almost all the way around me. Did I mention it was drafty in the lobby? Yeah, whatever. So anyway, they took me to jail, and they booked me in, and after the guy took my photo, and it was a deputy, all these are deputies, and he said, do you want to make a phone call? And I said, well, how long am I going to be in here? He said, well, in indecent exposure, you'll probably be out in 4 hours. I said, well, then I don't need a phone call. He said, all right. Well, I didn't realize that bail bondsmen don't like to talk to people from out of state, especially naked people from out of state. So anyway, they put me in general population. Well, the voice is telling me to mess with all these people. So I'm just talking trash and stirring up hate and discontent with all these gang members and everybody else. And the deputy sees what I'm doing, and he snatches me up and sticks me in a cell by myself. He probably saved my life from, all these guys are ready to kill me. And so I'm in this cell, and there's a window in the door about that wide, about, 3 foot tall, whatever. And so I'm making all these different signs and banging on the door and I was just causing trouble. And I don't know what I was doing. I don't have a clue what I was doing. But they came in and set up a camera, and they videoed me for a while, and then they came and got the camera and took it away. And then a short time after that, a couple of deputies rolled in with some handcuffs, came in my cell and handcuffed me, and they took me out of that pod across the hall into another pod that just so happened to be solitary confinement. So I wasn't in jail a couple of hours, and I was in solitary, and put me in a hole. So now I'm in the hole, and they put me in the cell, and the voice starts to get worse and worse and worse. It started to tell me things like, this is not really a jail, this is a CIA training facility, and they're teaching these CIA agents who are dressed like deputies, but they're training them how to kill people, and you're on the list, and your mother's on the list, and your son is on the list, and they're going to kill all of you. And I believed everything the voice said to me. I believed, and I did everything the voice told me to do. And so I was scared, man. I was terrified. And so as long as I was locked in my cell, I felt okay. But when the door opened up, I was scared. And and one of the things that happened early on, the cell door popped open, and the deputy walked in, and I think he said hi to me. But when he walked in from the door, the voice said, "Kill him. Don't kill him. Kill him. Don't kill him. Kill him." And he turned around, walked out, "Kill him. Don't kill him. Kill him." He walked out the door, and the door shut, and the voice stopped talking. I hate to think of what I would have done if it had stopped on killing. You know, if you're dealing with somebody who's hearing voices, you really got to be on your A game. That whole officer safety thing is a real deal, because you don't know what the voice is telling them. You know, and if you get somebody like me, you know, that does whatever the voice says do, then you got trouble. I started to hallucinate. I began to see police officers and firefighters from Williamsburg that I knew. I saw a nurse from the hospital that I knew. And you know, you might say, well, the battalion chief that you saw, Eric Stone, you used to be roommates. You just look like Eric. It really wasn't Eric. You know, or Kenny Lawson, the lieutenant with the police department, even though you were his best man, you know, you were the best man at his wedding, and you've known him for 30 years. It's just not him. It just looked like him. And but then I saw my son jumping up and down on a bed for 3 nights in a row on the 3rd floor of the jail. I could see him jumping up and down the bed. And you can't tell me I don't know what my son looks like. I saw my son. Hallucinations are extremely real. And you should never buy into a hallucination. You know, if you say, somebody says, "Oh, I see bugs. Bugs are everywhere, and I got to burn the house down to kill these bugs." You know, you'll say, "Oh, yeah, I see the bugs too. Come on, let's go." If you get them to the hospital and they go, "Well, I saw the bugs and the police officer saw the bugs," they ain't telling them. So you get in trouble that way. But anyway, later on, I found out that I was in a 2-story jail. I hallucinated an entire 3rd floor of a building with my son on it. Hallucinations are incredibly real. And I was eating sometimes I wasn't. The voice would tell me that my food was poisoned, and I would sometimes just throw the food around the cell. Sometimes I'd stick it back through the tray slot. But, so I wasn't eating as much as I normally would eat. And not that the jail portions are big anyway, but so every now and then they would come and get me, pull me out and clean my cell. Well, the one time, and I was always scared. Every time they came in and got me, I was always really scared of them. And one time they came in and handcuffed me behind my back. They led me out into the pod area, and a deputy went in to clean my cell. There was a colonel by the door, maybe 30 feet away, maybe a little further. And in front of me, there were 4 deputies in front of me, 4 deputies behind me. There was a lieutenant to my right and a deputy to his right. They came loaded for bear. They weren't messing around. And in front of me, the 4 deputies, one of them had like an electric shield, pepper spray, a taser, video camera. The 4 behind like a rocket launcher and hand grenades. I mean, they weren't playing, man. They were ready. And so I'm sitting here and I'm handcuffed behind my back and I'm just scared. I mean, I just know at any minute they're going to attack me. And I look over to my right and I see the lieutenant, and just as soon as I looked at him, the voice said, "When I tell you, take him down." Now I'm handcuffed behind my back. And it was like this. You got the legs of the lieutenant, the legs of the deputy standing next to him, and I'm here. And the voice said, "Go," and I ran and jumped. And I hit him in his waist. I knocked him into the deputy next to him, got one of his legs, and locked my ankle. Now, I couldn't have done that if I'd have tried. But I locked it ankle, and I just twisted my body as hard and fast as I could, and we all 3 went down. Now, we went down kind of slow. The one deputy had a leg for leverage. You know, he had a free leg. But when we went down, man, that lieutenant was highly pissed off. 'Cause he came up punching me in my face. I mean, he was wearing me out. And all I could do was try to turn away from him. Well, the colonel, he comes running over. You can't hit him. You can't hit him. You can't hit him. I was glad to see the colonel. So anyway, they pulled him off of me finally, and they stuck me back in my cell. But that's just, I did whatever the voice said to do. And so at some point, I think they figured out that this guy must be mentally ill. So they load me up in a truck. I'm on work, a van, and they take me to Columbia, South Carolina, which apparently there's a psychiatric hospital there, a state hospital. I understand it's closed now. But I was evaluated there by, there's a room full of people, a doctor, a social worker, a nurse, and some other people. And but they diagnosed me as being bipolar type 1 with psychotic features. There's two types of bipolar, type 1 and type 2. Type 1, or type 2 is, if you have an episode, typically medication can control it, can rectify the situation. At least that's what I'm told. And then type 1 is you typically, if you go through a psychotic break, you typically have to be institutionalized. And the psychotic features, that means you're hearing voices on one side of the bipolar. So you got mania and you got depression. Well, I never heard a voice when I was depressed. I only heard it when I was manic. So they call that psychotic features. So I was bipolar type 1 with psychotic features. They took me back to the jail in South Carolina, back to in Spartanburg. And so I was in the jail, and like 2 or 3 days later, they picked me up and they took me to a psychiatrist in town. And I talked to the psychiatrist briefly, and he prescribed me 900 milligrams of lithium. You remember what I was on before? 1350. So they didn't put me back on the same level of medication. And so they start me on 900 milligrams of lithium, 300 in the morning, 600 in the evening. And but everything is supposed to come through my tray slot in my cell: food, toilet paper, pills, everything. Well, and I was fine with that because as long as they didn't come in, I felt safe. Well, one night, I'd only been on the meds a few days. And remember I told you it takes a while for the stuff to get into your system to work right and to get a therapeutic effect. And so the door popped open to my cell one night, and there's a deputy standing there, and he's got 2 white cups, little paper pill cups, and he goes, "Come take your medicine." And I was like, as soon as he said that, he turned over, and there was a cell next to mine, and he was talking through the crack into the door to the inmate next to me. And so he's talking to him, and I walked right up on him, and I looked down in the pill cups, and when I looked down, I saw one pill cup had 2 pink pills in it, and I recognized that as being lithium. The other one had clear liquid, and when I saw the clear liquid, the voice said, "That's cyanide. They're gonna kill you." Right at that time, the deputy turned around and looked at me and saw that I didn't have my cup of water. He goes, "Get your water." I'm not a very pleasant fellow. So I went back, and all I had in the cell was rolled toilet paper and a red Solo cup. That's all I was allowed to have. So I took my red Solo cup, and I'm filling it up, and I'm shaking because I'm thinking, this is it. They're going to kill me. How am I going to get out of this one? And so my mind is going a mile a minute, and I take my cup of water, and I go back, and he's back talking to the guy again, and he's talking to the crack in the door, and I walked right up on him, but just before I got up on him, the voice said, "Go, go, go." Well, what are we doing here that, So I came out, I pushed him out, the cup of water went flying, the 2 pill cups he had, they went flying, and I got it, pushed him out, and he had a short sleeve shirt on. I grabbed him by his short sleeve, and I jacked him up on his toes, and I just commenced kicking him right up under his arm, as hard as I could kick him, and as fast as I hate telling y'all that part, because, it's just, plus firefighters and police officers don't typically beat each other up. And, I've stopped an ambulance one time to help a police officer handcuff somebody because they were having a tough time. And, But anyway, and I'll never forget it. I'm kicking this deputy as hard as I can kick him. And I can hear this one guy behind me a little ways down screaming, "Kill him, kill him, kill him." You know, y'all wear a badge. People want to kill you because you stand for law and order. You know, it's a messed up situation. You know, with us, the fire department, people typically happy to see us when we show up. Y'all got a hard job, man. But anyway, I kicked him a bunch of times and he fell down. And thank God I walked away from him. I guess I figured he couldn't hurt me at that point. And so I walked away from him, and it wasn't a few seconds later the door popped open and a blue wave of deputies rolled in there. And they put me down pretty quickly and handcuffed me behind my back. And everybody in the hole, everybody in solitary confinement, people just beating on the doors and screaming and yelling and hollering. And so they dragged me out of there into the hallway. We went down the hallway. We made a right. We made an immediate left into a room, and there was 2 showers in this room. And they shoved me in the corner of the shower, and they just commenced to beating the ever-loving dog crap out of me. I mean, they were beating me. And there was a lieutenant who got me. Oh, just before we went into that room, there was a lieutenant that hit me point blank with pepper spray or OC or whatever it was in my right eye. Got me dead in the middle of the eye. And man, I was on fire. Then they shoved me and started beating me up in the shower. And that lieutenant had found a washcloth, and he was soaking that thing down with washcloth. And he kept sticking it. He was twisting it, kept pushing it, twisting in my left eye. And man, I was burning up. I mean, these guys, I was on fire. And so they did that for a while. They dragged me out of the shower, and we went back into the hallway. We went down a little further, made another left into another room, and there was a little 4 foot by 4 foot holding cell. And they took me in there, they threw me on the floor, and they just commenced to stomping on me. And they all had boots on, and I don't know, I can't think of anything much more painful than stomping on ribs that are already broken, because they were breaking my ribs up, and they just kept stomping. And it was painful. I mean, I can't think of many more things more painful other than maybe childbirth, probably more painful than that. But it was horrible. And so I guess they did it for a while, and then I played dead. I stopped breathing. I held my breath. And so they left me alone. But a long story short on that, well, you know, I forgive those guys for that. I mean, in Christianity, forgiveness, you know, the Bible says if you're not willing to forgive others, God won't forgive you your sins. So forgiveness is important. I just hope that one deputy can forgive me for attacking him. You know, I never would have done it if I was in my right mind. And long story short was I was found guilty of indecent exposure, and the judge was in no mood. I mean, maybe he knew what I had done in the jail. I'm fortunate that I didn't get any additional charges for assault and battery inside the jail. I guess with the mental illness thing, they figured they couldn't do anything with it. But I was let go. They gave me 10 days with the medications to go when I left the jail. The judge gave me 48 hours to get out of the state of South Carolina. He wasn't in no mood for any of my mess either. So I flew from South Carolina. My mom, actually, they went to a hotel. My mom called and she paid for the hotel room. And I had enough money on the canteen left to be able to afford a cab ride to the airport. So I flew back to Richmond, and my mom came to pick me up. And I saw her coming, and I stepped off the curb. I was going to grab the handle and get in, and she almost drove right over top of me. She didn't recognize me because I'd lost a bunch of weight and had that convict hairdo working for me. You know, I was looking kind of cute. And so she took me back. We were going down 64, and I kept asking, "Is Cole okay?" Cole's my son. "Is Cole okay?" Uh-oh, somebody forgot to turn the phone off. Kept asking for Cole. "Is he okay?" And she kept saying, "He's fine, he's fine, he's fine," because the voice told me at one point he was killed. He also told me that my mom was shot. so the CIA shot her in the face. The voice is evil. She kept reassuring me that that everybody was fine. And so we got back to town. She goes, "Tell you what I'm gonna do. We're gonna go get one of your vans, and then we're gonna go to get you a hotel room, get a newspaper, so you can try to find a job." And I mean, I can tell you, I lost everything. I spent 5.5 months in that jail in South Carolina. I lost it all. I had nothing left. No home, estranged from the family, no job, no income, no nothing. And so she took me to a hotel room and on Capitol Landing Road at Condo Lodge right there in the city. And got some food from the grocery store. And so I sat there and tried to read the newspaper to figure out what's going on and try to think about getting a job. And I kept thinking, I really want to go visit my son. I really want to go pick him up and take him to Chick-fil-A. We used to go to Chick-fil-A all the time. We'd get Chick-fil-A, and then we'd go feed the ducks and go to Busch Gardens, and we'd go do something. And I was afraid if I went to Chick-fil-A, went to see him, that the CIA would find him. Because I was still hearing voices a little bit after that 900 milligrams of lithium. Not nonstop, but just a little bit. And so I got to thinking that if I could get back into jail, I'll be okay. I won't be able to visit him, but I'll just stay in jail and he'll be safer that way. And so the only thing I can think of is something that happened in 1993.
7 p.m. 8 notifications.
In 1993, I was pumping gas. I'd been a volunteer with the fire department for about 10 years. And so I was pumping gas up in Lightfoot, and I had a scanner. I listened to the police department all the time. A lot of my poker playing buddies were police officers with James City County. So I listened to James City Station channel a lot. And so I heard an armed robbery just occurred, Jefferson National Bank, McClaw Circle, which is right next to Busch Gardens. And I got to thinking, man, if I was going to rob a bank, I probably want to get out of town. So I topped off the tank and I went over to the overpass. It used to be the Lightfoot Road overpass. Now it's the 199 overpass, exit 234. So I sat there on the overpass and I watched traffic coming in from Busch Gardens headed towards Richmond. And I watched and watched and watched. And the longer I sat there, the longer I said, you watch too many episodes of Cops when you were a kid. You're wasting your time. And so I got frustrated with myself. I said, well, there was one more pack of cars I could see coming, and the description was an old green pickup truck, 2 black males, and a blue license plate. And I thought, well, if it ain't in this pack coming, I'm going home. It's lunchtime, I'm gonna go eat. And lo and behold, here it comes, two black males in an old green pickup truck and a blue license plate. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. So I jumped on the interstate. And I ran him down pretty quickly. You're thinking, man, he caught up with him quickly. I wonder what he was driving. Well, I was driving a rapid response vehicle. Some people call them minivans. So anyway, I caught up with him. And that's back when the cell phones used to be mounted to the dash. And the transformer, the power supply was mounted under the seat. And I would turn it off. Turn off voiceover. All right, sorry. So I take the phone off. I call the non-emergency number to dispatch, and my friend Carol Martin answered the phone. And I said, "Hey, Carol, it's Bryan Sanderson." She goes, "Bryan, we're busy. We got a bank robbery. There's a lot going on. Blah blah blah." I said, "Carol," "I'm behind an old green pickup truck with 2 black males and a blue license plate. Do you want this tag, or do I go home and eat lunch?" And she said, "Well, give me the plate." And she ran the plate. She goes, "That's a hit out of Philadelphia." I said, "Hang on a second." So I hear her call the chief. The chief was at the bank down on McClaw Circle. So she goes, "Well, I've got a volunteer firefighter behind them on the interstate headed towards Richmond." He said, "Well, tell him if he can stay with them safely, call Henrico, call New Kent County, and call state police and tell them they're coming." So she said, all right. So he's shooting us. So she said, well, stay on the phone with me. And that's back when you go into Rome. You get into a certain area, you go into Rome. So I stayed on the phone with her till I got into Rome. And I told her, I said, I'm in Rome now. I'm going to call state police. So I called state police, talked to them for a while. And at the 205, New Kent came out of the median strip. And the 205 ramp, another unmarked car came down. And they got in behind them. As soon as they lit them up, when they lit them up, cash started flying out the passenger window. I mean, cash is just flying, man. And so they went ahead and they actually pushed them over and pinned them against. And so I just weaved back and forth and broke sideways and stopped traffic. And so when I stopped the traffic, they pinned them against the guardrail. But there was 3 or 4 state troopers up at the weigh station. And so when all the traffic cleared through, they came down the wrong side. Another one came sliding up in the median strip. And the helicopter was above us, flying right above us. And the passenger, he went out the window, over the guardrail, and into a neighborhood with the state police helicopter following him. And 20 minutes later, they showed back up in a police car, and he was under arrest. But in the driver, the one unmarked officer, he was a detective. He put a shotgun in the driver's face, and at that point, he was very compliant. So anyway, they dragged him out, handcuffed him. Long story short on that is, what they were doing is they were using duffel bags, and they were stealing vehicles in Philadelphia, coming down the Hampton roads and robbing banks. They found evidence in the duffel bags that connected them to like 3 other unsolved bank robberies. So I got an award from James City County, the crime line. They hit me for $800. And state police, they had that help eliminate auto theft. That was a brand new program. So they were trying to promote that. So they gave me $1,000. So I made $1,800 for that. And so it was good little bit of cash. But the one guy, I don't know if it was the driver or the gunman, but one of those guys got 17 years for that bank, or not counting the other bank robberies. And I got to thinking, if I robbed a bank, maybe they would give me 17 years. And if I robbed 2 banks, maybe they'd give me life. Now, that doesn't make any sense, but that's what I thought. And I like I say, I wasn't back in my right mind yet. When I was on no medication, when I was a big mess in South Carolina, 2 + 2 was 10. When they gave me 900 milligrams of lithium, 2 + 2 was 6. So I was better, but I wasn't right yet. So the next morning, I drove over to the SunTrust Bank right there on Merrimack Trail in the city. Oh, it's actually in York County, just inside the York County line. And I backed up to the bank. I got my company invoice. I wrote on the thing, give me $10K, I have a gun. Ripped the top of it off, walked in the bank, turned around, walked right back out. I walked in the bank, turned around, walked right back out. I knew it was a crime, I knew it was wrong. But in my mind, I had to do it. And so I walked in there, I think it was 5 or 6 times before I finally got the courage to go over and put the thing down. And I put the note down in front of the teller. She picked it up and read it and started shaking. She put it down. She reached over. She grabbed all the 50s and all the 100s and handed them to me. I didn't even think to take a bag. I'm not a very good bank robber. So she handed me all the money, and she turned, because she apparently knew that wasn't $10,000. So she turned like she was going to go get some more, and I said, that's enough. Thank you. Try to be polite, So I went to leave the bank, and there was a painter. He can't paint all over him, and he held the door for me. I'm like, hey, thank you so much, So I went out, put the money in the console, and I drove across town it was Nations Bank back then, and it's right there it's Bank of America now, right next to Ripley's, believe it or not, in Waynesboro, on Richmond Road. And so I walked in there. After you rob your first bank, the second one, it's kind of like an icebreaker, the first one. The second one was a lot easier. I took the carbon copy because I'm trying to streamline the process, So I walked in, I had no problem at all. I set the thing down, there's a young woman there, And she picked it up, she looked at it, set it down, went around and came around with a big old handful. Again, I didn't think to take a bag. And so she gave me all the money, and I said, thank you very much. And out the door I went, threw all the money in the console. I made it right out of the parking lot. I made it about 100 yards down to the traffic light by Wendy's, and the dye pack went off. And I got to tell you, dye packs have pepper spray in them. Not very comfortable. Very uncomfortable. And so I'm driving. It's hard to look cool when you're driving with your head out the window. And that's what I was doing. And it's strange because the red dye stayed in the console, but the pepper spray got out. I don't know how that happened. But anyway, it pepper sprayed me real good. So anyway, I finally cleared out. And so I drove down Richmond Road, got on 199 there at Lightfoot, and I was driving myself to VPRJ, Virginia Peninsula Regional Jail. I was going to go turn myself in. And I got down 199 until I got to Jamestown Road. When I got to Jamestown Road, I looked at my side view mirror and there was a police car there. And I thought, well, maybe that's a coincidence. And so I got down to the next traffic light at Brookwood Drive. I looked at my side view mirror, there was 2 police cars there. I said, well, maybe it's not a coincidence. So we came off that light, they lit me up. I went over the Jack Massey Bridge, pulled over and parked. I got way off the road because I didn't want to block any traffic because I'm trying to be courteous, And so these guys, they did a felony stop on me. They pulled me out the truck at gunpoint, and so he's had the one, and I recognized the one of them, and I didn't know either one of them. I recognized one of them, and then he's putting handcuffs on me. He goes, where are you coming from? So I'm coming from both banks. I admitted to 2 crimes in one sentence. I told that to the inmates when I got to jail. They're like, you're stupid and you can't sit with us. Fine, I'll go sit with the drug dealers. So, I was driving the ideal getaway vehicle. It was a work van with a ladder on the roof and my name and phone number on the side of it. The phone number in case anybody had questions. So anyhow, so that's how. So anyway, I was arrested, and a matter of fact, one of the detective, he interviewed me, and he knew me from a fire training class somewhere that I don't know if I was teaching or whatever, but I didn't remember him, but he remembered me, and he was real nice to me. And I was thirsty. I've been drinking water the whole time here, but he gave me a couple of bottles of water during the interrogation or the interview, whatever you want to call it. And so he took me to jail and signed me up for a psych consult. I think that was on a Friday. The psychiatrist came in every Tuesday. And so I talked to the psychiatrist on a Tuesday, and he ordered lab work done, so the blood work came back and my lithium level was low. Remember I told you they gave me medication, they gave me lithium when I left the jail, and I never missed a dose. I was only out of jail about 36 hours before I was right back in jail again. But I never missed a dose of the lithium. And so they checked it, it was low, so they bumped it from 900 to 1200. Gave it a week, did more blood work, they checked it again, it was low. They bumped it from 1200 to 1500, gave it a week, more blood work, checked it, it was low again. They bumped it to 1800, they doubled it. They went from 900 to 1800 milligrams, and finally at 1800 milligrams, they checked it and it was within the therapeutic range. And so now I take so much lithium, I pee batteries. I have a lot of lithium. So that's how that worked out. But how it worked out is when I came out of it, when I was in my cell, I woke up one morning, and every day I was telling myself, I'm going to prison, I'm going to go to prison, it's going to be all right, my son's going to be fine, I won't be able to visit him, but it's going to be safe for him. And all of a sudden I woke up one morning and I said, I'm going to prison. Oh, wait a minute, I'm going to prison. And it was like, I was born and raised in the country. It's like walking about 500 yards into a cornfield and turn around and walk around. It's uncomfortable. You can't see anything. It's kind of hot and stuffy. And when you walk out the end, it's clear. You can see everything. It's nice and cool. It was like walking out of a cornfield. And I turn around and look behind me. There's nothing but carnage. Everything, just a total train wreck behind me. And I was like, man, I started calling everybody. I called my attorney. I called my mom. I said, man, I got to get, I need some help. So, long story short on that was I was found not guilty by reason of insanity. And they turned me over to the Department of Mental Health, and they sent me to Central State Hospital in Petersburg. So I was there for 6 months, and I was on a ward. There was probably, 18 or 20 men on this ward. And some of them were slightly mentally ill. Some of them were very mentally ill. I learned a little bit about how that particular hospital controlled the people, the patients. They controlled them with food. And what they did every day, they give you a point sheet, just a regular sheet of paper. But if you take your meds 2 or 3 times a day, you get a point for each one of those. If you take a shower, you get a point. If you brush your teeth, you get a point. They got little, Monday through Friday, you got little groups, 45-minute groups. And if you go to your little groups, each instructor will give you a point for each one that you go through. And so that's how they do it. So, and what they do is at the end of the week, they add them all up and convert them to money, and you can take your points and go to the canteen and get ho-hos and cupcakes. Right? So during the week, if you get out of line, somebody, you may take your points. No, not my Twinkies. So I mean, they will behave based on, and if they're full blown psychotic, that ain't gonna matter. But most of the time, they control them with the food, and so I started seeing people. Another thing I noticed too, with people who were symptomatic, you may have somebody who would pace, man, to get up on a hallway and just pace. And so that was one thing. Or another thing you might see somebody do, you might see them rocking back and forth, talking to the voice, rocking and talking. So both of those are symptoms. And so, but every day at 3 o'clock, if you owned the Walkman radio, they would give you a Walkman radio. Well, I didn't have one. But I'd see some of these guys who are rocking back and forth and pacing back and forth. They put their headsets on. They go sit in the corner and listen to music, and not the first symptom in the world. So I ran a support group for 12 years for the mentally ill. It's kind of like AA for for the mentally ill is a better way to explain it, or the only way I can think to explain it. But I've had many people who've told me in the past that music makes the voices stop. So if you get stuck transporting somebody, find out what they want to listen to. Another thing is the food. Stick some peanut butter crackers and a bottle of water in the back of the car if you've got that option. Because a lot of times you get out and forget to eat. They get off their meds, they get out and forget to eat. And so, give them a little bit of food. So anyway, I was there for 6 months, and I learned a little bit about mental illness there. But I was fine. I mean, I was completely and totally fine. I felt like nothing ever happened. But so anyway, I was released. They turned me over to Colonial Behavioral Health at CSB there in Williamsburg. And so I started over, and they wouldn't let me work at all. So instead of, they had a day program. So I went to this day program with just full of people with mental illness and other type of disabilities. But that wasn't a lot of fun. That was a long day. And then so I talked them into letting me become a volunteer at Eastern State. So I went there as a volunteer, and I took a class there, a 40-hour class, an 80-hour class it's called a peer support specialist. Now it's called peer specialist. It's basically mentally ill people being, helping other mentally ill people, being support. So I did that, and I volunteered for about a year, and then the psychiatry, or the psychology person, the head psychology and forensics, came to me and asked me if I'd be willing to work part-time. So they hired me on part-time. So I did that. I met a lot of people there. Another thing, I started the handyman business back up. Started doing dryer vents. That's one of the things that I did before when my other business was cleaning dryer vents. and I made pretty good money doing that. And so my relationship with my son, we got back on track and started spending time together. And we were working at it 3 days a week, spending a little bit of time here and there. So everything was going good in that respect. And I had a guy named Dean Barker. He was the co-chair of the CIT coalition here in the state, and he had invited me to come talk to this new program called CIT. That was in 2008, so that's been a while ago now. And so I went in and told my story, and so from there, Virginia Beach called me, contacted me, wanted me to come help them. And then so now I've moved around, so I'm here in Chesapeake, and I do Newport News and Hampton. So I do 5, James City, Williamsburg. So I do 5 different programs now and helping out. It's a great program. I've talked to over 110, maybe over 115 CIT classes so far. And so everything was going well, and I actually went through the 40-hour class. I think it was in 2010, and in 2011, Virginia Beach, they put me through the trainer and made me an instructor with them. So I like the program, and by you taking this class, you're making a difference for other people. You'll be helping out. And so the one problem I had and I couldn't shake was weight gain. I was still fat, and I was sick of it, man. I just didn't like it. And so, the Bible talks about it, without faith it is impossible to please God. So I said, I'm going to have some faith, man. I'm going to have some faith. I prayed about it, and I feel good, and I haven't had any troubles. I feel okay. I'm going to stop taking the meds. So I stopped taking the meds, and that was September 2012. And for 13 months, everything was fine. No problems at all. Everything went great. And October 3rd, 2013, I woke up and the voice said to me, he's in the basement building a bomb. And I was in a 14-unit apartment complex. I was the maintenance guy for the apartment. I knew everybody there, and I knew the guy down there. I came out on my front porch. His truck was gone. I went down and I broke into his apartment and turned the place upside down. The voice told me it was 2 pipe bombs. And I tore the place up. I tore the place to pieces, and there was nothing there. So I walked out on the patio, and there was about a 50-gallon trash can sitting there with a blue tarp over it. And I walked up to the tarp, pulled the tarp off. When I looked down, all I could see was grass and dirt. And when I looked at that, the voice said 10, 10, 10. Well, 10, 10, 10 is fertilizer. And I thought, man, this guy's building a fertilizer bomb. Remember Timothy McVeigh, who blew up the federal building in Oklahoma City? I thought, man, this dude's doing a fertilizer bomb. So I called a friend of mine at the police department. This was in the city of Williamsburg city limits. And I told her what was going on. She said, well, stay away from it. I'm sending everybody. I said, all right, fine. So every fire department rolled in, police department rolled in, and it didn't take them long to figure out that Sanderson was off his meds. And so they figured it all out. The police chief came to me. Of course, I knew him. He said, Bryan, you know what, man? He goes, can you help me out? He goes, can you go talk to the doctor down at the hospital? That would really help me out a lot. I said, yeah, sure thing, Chief. Anything I can do to help you, I'm always willing to help out. He said, all right, great. So they didn't handcuff me. They just put me in the back of the police car, and they drove me down there, and I was evaluated, and they sent me, a friend of mine, Kenny, came. He was a police officer, lieutenant. He heard about it. He came off duty and picked me up and drove me over to a place. It's called it's a Williamsburg place, I think. It's a private psychiatric hospital facility. So they took me in there, and Dean Barker, remember the guy that got me starting to do CIT to start with? He showed up. Eric Stone, battalion chief with the fire department, he showed up. So they got me in the building there, and they put me in a room, and it was a real pretty young girl, maybe like 20 years old, 21, real young, really, really attractive. And I was sitting in a chair, and I had my head against the wall like this, and she was right here on my right, and she was typing, and she was asking me a bunch of different questions, and I was just answering her questions. And out of the blue, the voice said, "That is Benjamin Netanyahu's daughter." Well, Benjamin Netanyahu is the prime minister of Israel, you know. I looked at her and was like, "You got a pretty daughter, you know, whatever." So I put my head back, and when I put my head back against the wall, the voice said, "No, that's Satan's daughter." I looked back at her again, and her face turned white and black, and it began to spin like a top, and it's spinning and spinning, and then it began to melt. And it started melting like this, from the forehead down, and melting, melting, melting. It got down to the eyes, and all I could see was these two red, demonic-looking eyes. It's the scariest thing I ever seen in my life. And I punched the demon in the face. Another part of the story I hate to tell. Innocent girl, she didn't do a thing wrong. The saving grace was I was sitting in the chair when I hit her. If I'd have been up and put my body weight into it, I probably would have knocked her teeth out. I was told that they called an ambulance for her, and she refused treatment and drove herself to the hospital. Apparently it didn't split her lip or knock any of her teeth. So I'm grateful. I thank God for that. But anyway, I hit her, and I ran out of the building. And when I ran out of the building, I blacked out. And the next thing I recall was I was sitting on a park bench, and I had my socks and my shoes off. This park bench was on the property of this psychiatric facility. And I was rubbing my feet. And in front of me were two James City County deputies. Police officers. I didn't know either one of them. There was a battalion chief with James City Fire Department who I did know, and there was a firefighter next to him I did not know. And then on the other side, there was probably 15 or so employees. They all had the name badges around their neck on the lanyards. And about that time, a guy named, I think he was a major at the time, Major Don Jander with the Williamsburg Williamsburg Police Department, and he was out of his jurisdiction. But he comes running. Of course, I was at the fire department when we worked together. He was also one of my handyman customers, and he was also a CIT instructor. So I knew him pretty well. So Don comes running up, and I said, "Hey, Don." He said, "Hey, Brian." I said, "Don, is this CIT training?" He said, "No, Brian, it's not." He goes, "You've assaulted somebody, and you have to go to jail." I said, "Oh, okay." So I put my socks on, put my shoes on, stood up to my feet, turned around, let them hang. I said, "Can we use 2 pair of handcuffs?" I said, "I got a bad shoulder." They said, "No problem." So they put on 2 set of handcuffs, they handcuffed me, put me in the car, took me to jail. And a lot of the people at the VPRJ, the jail there, they had been through CIT, and they recognized me. And they put me right in medical, stuck me right in medical there. And I had actually done a CIT class, or I'd done a presentation at the jail for a bunch of nurses from other jails. So the head nurse there recognized me, and so she was real nice to me too. But I kept blacking out, and I don't know how many days I was there. I think 4, but I kept blacking out. And at one point, my psychiatrist, they brought him in, and he talked to me for about 30 seconds and figured out I was psychotic out of my mind. But I came out of a blackout, and I was soaking wet because the floor was wet because I had flooded the cell. And I came out of a blackout again, and the food was on the floor, so I could tell I had eaten recently. And I came out of another blackout, and this toilet was all blocked up. And I came out of another blackout, and the bed was upside down on the other side of the cell. Came out of another blackout, I was naked. I guess I pushed it through the trace light. I don't know, but I didn't have any clothes. And the last time I remember blacking out, I was laying on the floor. The cell was flooded. my head was right next to the door jamb. My head was right next to the door. And when I came out of the blackout, the voice said, "You have to blind yourself." And before I knew what I was doing, I took my left index finger and I shoved it in this eye, past the eye, back up into the socket. And I did this number a couple times, and I pulled my finger out, and I must have had a brief moment of sanity, because I said, I can't do this, I can't do it, I just can't do this. And the metal door, the steel door jambs are here, and I just slammed my head into the door jamb and knocked myself out. And the next thing I recall, I was laying on a bed, and we don't even know how many days it was, somewhere between 7 to 10 days later. I was laying on the bed, and I heard a lady's voice, and she said, "Bryan, my name is Tammy. I'm the nurse here at Eastern State Hospital. I'm here to put ointment on your eyes." Okay. So I could feel her taking the gauze off. I could feel her removing the patches, and I could feel the ointment going in my eyes. And all I could see was pitch black. Couldn't see a thing. And I said, "Am I blind?" And she paused. She said, "Yeah, you're blind." And that's how I found out. I have no memory of destroying my eyesight. I gouged my right eye out. This is a prosthetic, a piece of plastic. And apparently, I took a fingernail and scraped the pupil off of this eye. I'm totally blind. I've had 5 opinions. The last opinion was a team of surgeons at Johns Hopkins in Maryland, which is one of the highest rated eye centers in America. And their finding was the same as the other 4 opinions. There's nothing can be done. Get a cane, get a dog. And so, I told you I'm a Christian, so I'm believing for a miracle, because that's the only way I'll ever see again. And but anyway, they got my medicine. They got my head screwed back on straight at Eastern State, and they sent me back to jail. Man, being in jail, being blind and in jail is zero fun. And can't tell you how many times I walked into that stainless steel toilet that was bolted to the wall. But and it's a long day in there too, because you can't read. You can't do anything but sit there and do nothing, just think. And I thought a lot. I got a lot of thinking done. But I thought, all these CIT programs that I work with, I wonder if anybody's going to ever want me to come back and help them again. They're going to want to deal with somebody like me who's done what I've done to myself. So I was released November 10th, 2013. And my mom, God bless my mom, she's an angel, came pick me up, took me to her house. And I wasn't out of my orange jumpsuit hardly any time, and the phone rang, and it was my friend A.J. Jones. She's a lieutenant with Virginia Beach, and she's heard my story lots of times, but never heard the blind part of it, So she called me up and said, "I'd like to come talk to you and see how you're doing." So she came up, I told her what happened, and she said, "Well, let's go eat lunch." So we went out, she bought me lunch, and we went down Duke of Gloucester Street and talked and carried on and stopped and had coffee. And she says, "Look," she goes, "when you're ready to come back and do CIT, we're ready for you. We want you to come back." And all the rest of the programs did too. All the Chesapeake, they sent 5 people, a team of 5 to pick me up and take me to lunch. And everybody wanted me to come back and start off doing CIT again, so that's what I've been doing. So I do a lot of that. But my relationship's good with my son, and I got a good relationship with Mom, and I got lots of friends. I got so many friends coming by and stopping at my place. The neighbors think I'm selling drugs. But anyway, we could do questions. We could do questions and answers. You can ask me anything you want to. You can't hurt my feelings. You just can't raise your hand.